Get recorded. All right, I just hit record. Thanks for being here on the June 30th edition of the Business of Ag Success Group. Many of you are going to watch the replay because you're not here right now because presumably you're taking the holiday off. I got a big announcement from my man, Jared. Jared, give us the big announcement. Huge week for you. Huge week for you. He's got his new venture going with his new business. He put out the message to everybody. So go ahead and tell us about your new venture.
Well, we've been working on it for a while, but over the last several years have been providing, a countless amount of hours and days training insurance agents and agencies throughout the country. We kind of got sick and tired of it, telling agents what they needed to do for our clients versus just doing it for the clients. So we decided to start a crop insurance agency, got a couple partners in the mix. We'll go from 0 to 250, 260,000 acres here in the next couple months. So a very sizable agency from the start. And in addition to that, we look to do all the government work for the farmer, all FSA programs, FSA elections, certification of acres. We've had the alphabet soup of different government programs over the last 5-6 years. And in addition to that, I have the opinion that we can streamline the farmers' entry into the regenerative ag space, carbon credit market specifically. We'll have all that data from the crop insurance information, all their FSA data, already have all their financial information, have all their marketing information, years and years of crop history, crop plans. Looking to hopefully partner with a few valuable outlets in that regenerative ag space to ultimately bring a block of 200,000-300,000 acres of producers to deal with maybe the bigger players versus the knuckleheads in the industry that are trying to pick off every individual farm. So we're excited to do it. Kind of got official here in the last week and working through a few more kinks, but we're up and running and we signing over some policies starting next week actually.
So I'm kind of excited for Jared. I golfed with him 1 week ago. We got done working at Kelly Garrett's videotaping. So at 2:15 in the afternoon, we played golf at the Dunlap Country Club, which is my new favorite place to golf because they have Coors banquets. And I think I might have even stuck Jared with the tab after we got done. But anyway, Jared and his insurance man talked so much. Finally, they did everything but golf. And finally, on hole number 9, I said, I feel like I've been at the Iowa Crop Insurance Association meeting. Normally, I get paid to attend these fucking things. So you know what? Shut up and golf for the second 9, please. Anyway, but it's kind of exciting because Jared's a consultant for farm finances because a lot of people are really good at farming. They're not so good at understanding the money. So he's basically a hired CFO for farmers. He's a crop marketing advisory guy, and he's teaming up on the crop insurance. And as he says, navigation of these government programs. And then if there's a fold on the carbon credits and nitrogen reduction money to be out there, he can bring it all. So I think it's a good package. I think he's going to be, I think you're going to be busy once you get the thing integrated. Did you hear what I just said, Jared?
We're excited. Thank you.
Did you hear what I just said also about
yep, we're excited. Thank you.
You're the reason I didn't golf well for the first 9 because all you did was talk about crop insurance. Did you hear that?
Hey, why did you leave out the fact of who beat you guys single-handedly on the back 9?
Jared's actually a good golfer, which means I spent too much of my time growing up working on the dairy farm and not golfing, clearly. All right. Moving it on now, let's talk about Proposition 12. Here's the thing. This is the third, and Todd can give me a little bit more on this because he's more obviously in the hog business. This is the third initiative passed in the state of California since the year 2008. It was Proposition 2, I think it was, Proposition 8, Proposition 2, Proposition 12. If you're not familiar, and I know a lot of you are watching the replay, some of the states don't do this. California is known for this. The Western states do propositions. Remember, I live in Arizona part of the year. So you'll have these big campaigns that are pushed usually by cause groups, and they get shitloads of money behind them, and they will be on every corner, vote for proposition number whatever, proposition 3, 5, whatever. It does not happen in my home state of Indiana. It happens in the Western states, particularly California. So cause groups, Humane Society of the United States in particular, PETA, go to a place like California and they create this initiative and they get it on the ballot. Proposition 2 or 8, whatever it was in 2008. This is the third one, Proposition 12. It was passed in 2018, 2020. Help me out, Todd. 2018.
2018, yeah.
2018, it passed in the election of 2018 on a 2-to-1 vote. Basically, about 66% of Californians voted for Proposition 12. It's been the same line, same percentage roughly on the other two votes, on the other two initiatives prior to that. Why are we talking about it now for something that was elected in 2018? Because it was supposed to be enacted this year. So it gave it basically a 4 to 5 year window before it actually became active. What is Proposition 12? It's about pen sizes for livestock. It talks about pork in particular. In the state of California, there's like more pigs at your county fair than are raised in the state of California. It's not a pork production state. They do produce poultry. They don't produce any pork of consequence in the state of California. But this one was the first one that didn't just talk about legislation and regulation for pen sizes and animal housing in California. It said any animal that is sold into, meaning if the pork or the poultry or the veal comes into the state of California, it has to adhere to Proposition 12. Therefore, it's a de facto national regulation. Why? Because California is so outsized in its influence. 13% of the population of the United States lives in California. 15% of the pork consumption in the United States happens in California. They outconsume themselves. You think, oh, there's a bunch of vegans out there. There's also a lot of Hispanics and Asian people. Hispanics and Asians, their chosen protein is pork. So it's a big deal, and it's now still a hot debate. Why are we talking about it again in the Business of Ag Success Group? Because the Supreme Court just upheld it. It was taken to court, and that's where Jamie Eggers on here with the Iowa Pork Council. Who are you again, Jamie?
Not anymore.
Oh, anyway, Jamie Eggers has been around pork for a while. And then my buddy Rob Brenneman, who is a large-scale hog operator out of Iowa, and they're going to tell us about it. So tell us, Todd, then the rest that I missed, kind of fill in the blanks that I might have missed. For instance, the angle on the timing now with the Supreme Court.
Yep. So like Damian mentioned, the original proposition was passed in November of 2018. So we're nearly 5 years into this thing. And so the legal challenges started the next month. And so that got drug out. The original implementation, I believe, was January 2022, right, Jamie? And that was obviously delayed. There was a Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, I think, in March 22. They didn't complete the rules until September of 22. So, you know, originally we were supposed to be implementing this thing in January, and we didn't even know what we were supposed to be implementing. So, I mean, it's been a real, you know, pardon my language, but a real shit show from the beginning. So we didn't get the final rules until September of 2022. The Supreme Court decision came down on May 11th, I think. And so they upheld Proposition 12. It was a strange 5-4 ruling, mixture of conservative and liberal justices. So the dissenters were Roberts, Alito, Kavanaugh, and Brown Jackson. And Gorsuch wrote the opinion and was supported by Coney Barrett, Sotomayor, Thomas, and Kagan. So it's about as strange a 5-4 decision as we've had in a long time. So obviously that was a big blow to the industry. As Damian mentioned, California, I think, has about 12% of the population, consumes about 15% of the pork in the country, and they have 0.01% of the sows. So Damian kind of alluded to it, but really the big deal here is the strategy had been, let's go to states that don't really have any pigs and try to get ballot initiatives and legislation passed in those states. And, you know, the response was kind of like, well, you know, okay, whatever. There's no pigs in California. There's no pigs in New Jersey. There's hardly any pigs in Florida or whatever. But obviously, this really changes the game, because now a rule actually passed by ballot initiative is impacting the entire country. So wanted to kind of throw it over to Jamie in just a second and have her talk through kind of where we're at in terms of implementation and what we're looking at moving forward, since I gave you a quick history of it. The standards, 24 square feet of space, typically in a gestation pen system today, a lot of people have 18 to 14. So it's a significant difference. The animals must be able to turn around without touching other animals or the enclosure. And so that's the main issue. It basically outlaws gestation crates and increases the requirements for pen gestation. There were some early estimates, and we're trying to refine this a little bit more, but there were some early estimates of a cost to convert of somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 per sow.
By the
So
way,
if we use the low,
I want Rob Brenneman, I hope, is going to give us the numbers on the conversion and the money on this, because I think that this is completely lost on every consumer completely, and it's even lost on most of the ag people. So Rob, I hope you do have numbers for us on cost, but we'll get to that in a minute. Go ahead.
Yep. Just so to give you just a reference point, on a 1,200 sow farm, that would, on the lower end, that 1,500 number, you're talking about 25 years worth of profits, right? Yeah, based on the last 20 years of profits. If we go back and do the last 20 historical years of profits. So, I mean, it's a real huge financial burden. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys had the perspective to understand that this is a lot of money. This is a huge investment. And, you know, I'd be interested to get Rob's opinion, because I haven't actually talked to him about it yet, but Jamie and I have talked about it. And I think a lot of this is just going to go unfilled. I think the industry is just not going to be able to meet this requirement in, you know, big numbers enough to meet that California requirement with an unknown premium. You know, it's not like we're saying, you know, hey, you're going to get $5 a head extra to do this. Nobody really knows how much more money you're going to get. Presumably, if you're compliant, you're going to be able to sell pork for more, but we don't know how much that's going to be. So it makes the calculations really challenging. So anyway, I'll toss it over to Jamie now and let her she's been staying on top of kind of what we need to do to implement if you are compliant, or if you want to become compliant, what do these deadlines look like?
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you guys about this piece of it for sure. And Rob has been in it and living the, like, what the F do I do now? And those conversations with the packer and downstream customers about how do you get compliant product into California and what does that mean for my farm? So he will have a lot more intel and insight that will be much more interesting than the implementation timeline that I can share with you. But like Damian and Todd mentioned, so it covers poultry or eggs and veal and pork, and the egg people have been living this and the implementation and enforcement and certification longer than the other two. Veal's kind of been in there, but there's not such a huge volume that it gets the press that it does. And then pork really has been dealing with what does the timeline look like now since May 11th and the SCOTUS decision. So so even though it was technically rule that was supposed to go into place January 1st of last year, California Department of Food and Agriculture took a long time to actually write their final rule. So they had law, but they didn't write the rule to say like how we're actually going to make this work and into practice. They didn't do that until September of last year. So they wrote the code and then a process for certification for distributors and for producers last fall. But then with the SCOTUS case, they delayed, or there was an injunction technically on that delayed it until the outcome of that case. Well, then when May 11th came around, they said, we're going to start enforcement of Prop 12 for pork on July, which technically would be July 2, July 1, July 2 of this year. So that distributors and producers needed to be certified or registered with CDFA by the end of this year, and that all of the product in California after this weekend needed to be compliant. Lots of jockeying and lots of realization, like, well, how are we going to get everybody certified, and what do we do? Mostly, what do we do with inventory, pork inventory in California that on July 2 that was raised not Prop 12 compliant, right? So they have technically pushed out the enforcement date of for distributors and for producers until the end of this year. And they're giving space and time for producers and distributors to self-certify. And Rob can speak to that experience a lot more than I can. Regardless, producers and distributors are still going to have to be certified officially. So having had a certification audit, and we can talk about that process next, but they will have to have had that starting after January 1 of 2024. So
Hey, Jimmy, I just wanted to reinforce that they have shifted the enforcement or compliance of this off onto the meat packers, essentially, to confirm that they're meeting the regulations. So California passes this regulation that is impacting all other states, and they're not even willing to do the enforcement or compliance angle of that. They're going to make the industry police itself. So I mean, it's
yeah, Todd, and to that point, Todd, Jamie, I have a question on that. So, okay, it's left to the packer ultimately, but is there any regulation around that in terms of what the verification process is supposed to look like? Or is it kind of the packer can create their own verification system?
Yes and no, kind of. It depends, like the classic that. So what's interesting about
That's not a good answer. Come on.
What's interesting about it is, like, originally as the code was written,
Okay.
packers actually have very little responsibility in this. All of the like official certification through California Food and Agriculture is solely on the distributor and the producer, right? And then the role that the packer was really only playing in it has been, so you have some packers that are also distributors, but in general, the role that the packer has had in this mostly has been part of the audit trail verification. So they have to be a component of the record keeping to show that the market pigs they killed were segregated. They came from a finishing unit that was segregating or can guarantee or has a traceability element to the Prop 12 certified sow farm. But like,
and so another issue is, you know, so this doesn't really impact finishing pigs. And sometimes you have, you know, finishing farms that have pigs from several different sow farms. So now at the production side, we have to try to segregate and adjust our pig flows to try to make sure that, you know, for simplicity's sake, that all of those pigs are either compliant or non-compliant at every finishing farm. So, I mean, it's just a cascade of bullshit.
But what I guess I'm hearing you say is a packer has to have a committed kill, segregated kill for this.
yes.
Basically, yeah.
Wow, that gets really expensive.
Well, and you saw with Paline, you know, for those of you that might not know, that's a additive, let's call it, that was legal here in the US, but not was.
An additive, it's a steroid that these damn hog producers are putting in these pigs. And it's the reason that my kids have like big feet. You people are poisoning us.
Not a steroid.
Damian, someone might believe you.
But I think it's a good example because the industry essentially got rid of Paline because trying to keep them segregated, you know, between Paline and non-Paline was a huge, you know, hassle, just a giant headache. And that was real value. So, I mean, the producers gave up real value to get rid of Paline. So,
well, I was going to say that's the difference, right? There was real value to go to China because of that, right?
Right.
There's
or
no
or anywhere else.
predetermined value here.
Right.
Yeah,
It's all front end loaded for cost.
Well, Neville, what you're pointing out is the hog industry. The difference is people like Rob or whoever actually probably made the decision. And you can talk to this, Jamie and Rob. If we're going to have export markets that want us to be Paline free, then screw it, we'll just go Paline free.
Yeah.
We do give up efficiency of production. And yes, I know it's not really a steroid. I was jacking with you people. It's a growth promotant though. And the thing is, to that end, there was a value to saying, screw it, we'll go, just like the chicken industry said, apparently we're going to go, cage free by 2028 because Kroger, Walmart, all these people want to do it. Nobody sure as hell said they cared whether a sow had 18 feet or 24 feet. So that was not industry, obviously, supported by any means, right? Is there anybody in industry supported this, Jamie?
Well, some of the people that were already compliant, like, that already raised pigs outdoors or whatever, Nyman Ranch or some of those guys.
Nyman Ranch and some of those entities, being how they were already there, they supported it, yes.
But I want to ask one more question in this. So it's left to the packer, but then is it now Kroger's responsibility, Cisco's responsibility to ensure that they are purchasing Prop 12 compliant product from the packer?
Yeah, and so that's
Yeah.
the reason I said it basically lands on the packer, because they're the middleman. The producer actually has to go out and procure the audit to be able to be certified. So that's a new thing too. There's any of the other programs that's been arranged by the packer, and so you really got just a strange, and there's not a lot of clarity in exactly how this is going to be implemented. So it's just a strange implementation process for the supply chain.
So Jamie, I'd like her to finish a couple of her thoughts there. Because the packer, we have a choice of who we can have certify us.
Yep.
So that we have the choice of, and if we have somebody certify us and we as a producer don't like that, we can get somebody else's opinion. Or somebody else's opinion on how you interpret the rules. So go ahead, Jamie. You had something there, and I wanted to finish hearing you before I said any more.
Yeah, so Rob's right. So kind of a bunch of comments here, and I'll try to put a bow on them. The up to this point, or like technically by the rule, it's like I said, the heavy work for certification and auditing is on the distributor and the producer, and packers at this point really only have to, by the letter of the law, have to be a part of the audit trail. But I have heard through industry conversations that packers are really trying to step up to the plate here and help, aside from sorting out their, like, how are we going to segregate products? How is that going to look at our plants on a logistics side? In terms of the relationship and being a good part of the audit trail for this, packers as a whole are trying to help their producers that are Prop 12, that can produce Prop 12 compliant product today. So, Rob shared with you the Tyson self-certification. I know that several of the other commercial packers are starting to step up and are willing to pay for the certification audit for producers, so that dollar amount, that cost of doing business is on the packer and not on the producer. I know there are a lot of independent producer conversations with their packers about what that premium could be, or how that could shake out if you have Prop 12 compliant facilities or can produce those pigs now. Like Rob was mentioning, it's kind of varied. So their California Food and Agriculture certifies the auditors or auditing companies, and then the packer or the producer, whoever is arranging for the certification on the farm or paying for it, can use any of those certifying agents that they want that are approved by CDFA. So it kind of depends. Right now, it's depending a little bit on the relationship that
down there again
with the with the packer or auditing company. So like Tyson has a relationship with one of the auditing companies that is already a certifying agent for Prop 12. And so Tyson may say, we'll arrange for your audit with this auditing company that we already have a relationship with, or here's the list of certifying agents, you can find the one that you like. That relationship is getting sorted out between the packer and the producer right now. But they all have to be done by a certifying agent from CDFA.
So Jamie, for example, I'm really hung up here. I'm stuck here, right?
Yep.
So for example, Tyson would say Validus is a pre-approved company that can do this. Now, is it essentially going to operate much like a PVP that all of these pigs you have to follow a chain of custody. It all has to be tracked all the way through, that in case you ever get your audit gets audited, you have to show proof of that, right?
Yes, so on the packer side, yes, and the current self-certification right now, so that you don't, because there's lots of farms that need to be certified and not a ton of certifying agents, you know, we can't get everybody's official certification audit done in the next 2 days, right? So for the self-certification process and the obligation from the producer to the packer, right now is very much being treated as a PVP program. So that Rob showed you the
Hey,
copy of his affidavit.
can I bring the people that are not as livestock centric as you? What's a PBC, PDV, PDF? What's a PDF program? What the hell are you talking about?
PVP is a process verified program, much like an all natural or NHTC
Okay.
on the beef side.
Okay,
Yep.
now, by the way, again, I want to go back to that, Neville. Those things were all brought up because I'm out here and I think I can make a little bit more money. I can sell this for 40% more margin, 40% more gross and, more margin. This one was imposed upon us. I want to go to Rob Brenneman. Rob, this is a shitload of money, a shitload of compliance, stuff that you and I both hate. Why didn't the Packers wield their bat, which is significant, and just say, okay, I guess you just won't, we control almost all of the meat in this country. You just won't get any.
So first of all, let me show you a picture of 24 square foot. I don't know if you can see it or not. Is that too far out? Tell me.
That's pretty good. It looks pretty roomy.
Yeah, that's 24 square foot. And so back to your question of let them starve, which, that was a pretty common statement there for a little while until we've proceeded to lose about $40 a head in the last 6 months. Now, okay, so we take 17% of the pork out of the equation that we're selling today as producers. Who's going to starve? The packer or the person in California or the producer that just got eliminated because he can't compete anymore? So I think from the background of why there needed to be something worked out, means how it's already, I mean, we went to the max and with, going to the Supreme Court, that was one vote from being totally different than it was. And the reason, and Todd, I think you quoted the rules or the facts better than I have, but the reason that it didn't get overruled wasn't because of what we thought it should be overruled on. It was something else that held up Kavanaugh, right? That said it did let Congress take care of this. Quote that. I got so much shit on my mind I can't remember everything anymore. But what was the reason?
Yeah, so it's basically the discussion is around the Commerce Clause,
Right.
And how a ruling like this or how effectively legislation like this would impact interstate commerce. And so what Kavanaugh ended up basically saying was that they didn't have enough clarification from the legislature on what the definition of interstate commerce was. And so basically we can't get anything passed in the federal legislature, but basically he was saying that Congress needs to clarify, what qualifies as interstate commerce.
Right. Okay. So go back to when this all started, and it was going to be January of 22. And so some people geared up to meet that January 22 as a producer producing that product for that. And I think some of the retailers in California committed a premium to that product starting January of 22 to the producers that geared up earlier. Now, I don't know if every packer's got a deal or every processor's got a deal, but I know that some retailers geared up to pay that extra to help get that product compliant and get it on hand as of January. And so, as a producer, our goal has always been to, it's about cost. I mean, there's two things. Maybe it's about cost to everybody, but a packer, it's about cost. A producer, it's about cost. I'm not always 100% sure to the retailer it's about cost, but maybe it is. But the consumer, it's about cost. So everything we just did has nothing to do with cost, because we just raised the cost automatically on everybody. And so back to the point of how much a sow it's going to cost to convert versus how much a sow is going to cost if you build new are two totally different numbers. You know, it's probably double if you're converting, because there's a pretty good chance you're tearing out something that wasn't wore out to convert, versus if you were building new. We were in the process, we had all the plans out to build a new farm that it was going to be the way we've always done it, it's going to be crated. And this thing all of a sudden started to come around. And Tyson, when I first started, I said, hey, is there any reason I should look at Prop 12? And they said, hell no. And so anyway, so I designed the farm, got it all permitted for non-Prop 12. And all of a sudden they called and said, hey, have you started yet? And I said, I'm just getting ready to start. They said, would you consider Prop 12? And I said, show me the money. You know, like the McGuire, Jerry McGuire, show me the money. And so you got a quick question there, Damian?
Yeah, I do, because you're saying that if a couple of years ago, the Tyson people told you, don't even pay any regard to constructing. They said, if you're going to construct a new sow facility, don't worry about the Prop 12. Don't even make it part of your consideration.
Right. They said, you don't. I said, should I even consider? And they said, no, you really don't need to. I said, okay, that's great. And so then as we started the process, all of a sudden it's like it started to gain a little steam, like this is going to happen type of thing. And so I said, yeah, I could make some changes. And so I had to go back and redesign things, and then I had to add a couple buildings, but this was all new. So it wasn't near as bad as if I'd had to go in and remodel what I'd already put in. But it's still, you know, even new, it's roughly $800-900 a sow.
Yeah.
And so, you know, on a 12,000 sow farm, that's a considerable amount of money. And so when you look at that aspect, if somebody, I said, well, show me the money. If somebody's willing to pay for it, then, you know, I'll look at it. And we did. And, you know, is it over and above what we were doing? No, but we built it so that if Prop 12 didn't exist, all we got to do is put a few more animals in the pen, and we got a normal sow farm. So for me, I had the ability to design it to where all I did was all I have to do is add animals to the pen. I've got it set up for that, and I go back to normal production if Prop 12 goes away at my 18 to 20 square foot versus 24. The biggest caveat in that 24 versus 18 is that if you start out at 18 and a few fall out, you end up at 20, which is honestly about perfect, versus if you start out at 24 and a couple fall out, now you've got a lot of space. And that's where the expense comes in the facility, is that it's hard to justify that. It's hard to reconfigure that space without remixing the stuff, because in the old days, you'd breed them in the crate, leave them there 42 days, break check them, you know they're bred, you move them out into a pen, boom, done. But you don't have that first 42 days of a crate even where you get them break checked. So anything you put in that pen stays in that pen. And so what we do is we breed the sows. So we went Prop 12 on the new farm, and we're remodeling and building some new stuff on our home farm. We'll end up about 24,000 Prop 12 animals. And
Hey, Rob, do you different genetics? Are you using different genetics or same genetics?
Also, they're all PIC 1050s. Yes.
Okay.
Same
Interesting.
genetics. Yep. We didn't change anything. We multiply our own. So we in our indexing, we look at behavior, feet and legs, and all that type of stuff. Okay. So over the last 6 years, we've built a really awesome animal, which is not been too bad. But we did some creative things in the Prop 12 system with some free access stalls Jamie, I've had conversations with her, so I don't think I'm saying anything that's off base. Some free access stalls that if you need to treat them, you can run them in. You try the 6 hours. If that's not good enough, then the vet says, hey, we might have to do another day or two. Then and I think I'm right on this, Jamie, we can do that and then let them back out, right? And so we got creative in how we design. I got creative in how we designed the farm, and with the help of the people from Maximus and Hogslat and everybody and Jestall, people are working in this. I thought outside the box a little bit to make sure I didn't lose all my space. So these free access stalls can become cell crates and call crates and stuff. So that helps a little bit. And really, I'm kind of amazed at how well the animal is doing in that pen. And it is a lot of square foot. And so if the consumer, who's the ultimate one that's going to pay for this, if the consumer, which California chose and voted on as a consumer, that they want to pay for this because it costs more, that's a little different story. And then it comes down to it's imposed on you. Now, if it's imposed on you with no extra dollars or money coming in, now we've got a problem, because that just raised our cost. And in a business that's losing a lot of money today, which has not always been in the hog industry. I'm not a whiny bitcher person, but today it's a little rough and it's a little bad timing. But usually as a producer, especially a pig producer and a farmer, the blood in me says, we'll adapt and figure it out. And we kind of have. And so how do we keep our cost of production down with that added expense in a facility? And it's just like everything else, we've always done, we get better and we get better and we get better. And so hopefully we can keep the cost down and competitive, and whatever margin that we're getting or premium we're getting from Tyson and so on, hopefully that covers the extra cost.
All right, well, I'm gonna throw out there, Mr. Brenneman, I think you'll get a premium right now because Tyson and the other 3 packers need pork, because they actually didn't think, from what you said, they had absolutely confidence that this Proposition 12 wasn't even going to happen. They told you disregard it, and then all of a sudden they were scrambling. They need pigs, they need pork, they want to stay on the shelves in California. Here's the thing, it's just going to be like cage-free eggs. The premium goes away in about 1.5 years. You need to bust your ass to get that premium enough to pay the cost that you just absorbed in the next 18 to 24 months. My guess, you tell me, my guess, you better get your costs covered in the next 24 months, because I think the premium is going to go away. It has on everything else, like cage-free eggs as the example.
So back to the point of, Tyson saying disregard, that was 2 years ago. And so then as the pot started to boil, which was 6 months later, they saw what was going to happen and changed but pretty much 2 years ago, I mean, there was a handful of producers that had adapted and said, this is probably going to happen. But I think on the other end, they were being asked by a retailer to help supply that and had their ass covered. And I think in the world that we're in with Tyson, which we've got a tremendous relationship, I think they saw the fact that that this could start rolling. And then they started coming to a few producers and saying, we probably should get prepared for this. And how do we get prepared in a fashion? And I think so they saw it, but I don't think any of us producers, a lot of us producers had full faith that it probably wasn't going to happen.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What percentage shortfall is there going to be if let's say today, what percentage shortfall would we have out there in California?
It would be, now you're getting into trying to drive. That's probably a question I can't answer.
If we can meet a third of demand, I'd be shocked.
Yeah, so
Of normal supply. So we're going to be able to apply 30% of 33% of normal supply.
yeah, so Todd will have to help me with the math part of this if you put it towards the inventory. So if you say that about 35%, Steve Meyer says about 35% of sows in the United States are in open pen gestation.
Okay, yep,
Then of that 35% today, so a lot of those are like 18 to 20 square feet. So of that 35%, only about 3 to 3.5% of those sows are in Prop 12 compliant housing.
So that's,
Yikes.
so that's 69,000 sows out of 5.7 million.
okay, so that not only is California not gonna get any pork, but then we're also gonna have a supply glut in the other 49 states.
I think the percentage of, now keep in mind that as of today, anything that's in cold storage or freezer can be used till December 31st.
Yep.
That's gonna help some. And keep in mind, I think he's wrong on these numbers. I think there's more product than that exists today to go into California. I'm pretty confident of that.
Hey, by the way, Rob, I really like the fact that you just told Todd he's wrong. Usually I'm the only one that does that. And then he
Sorry.
gets
I-
mad. And then
I'm
Bobby.
not saying, I'm
And
not
then he's
saying
saying
it's
Steve
wrong.
Myers is wrong, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I would say that it's a little better than that, but also there, whatever was set up to go, those guys were already in place a year plus ago. And then like we starting a year ago to build are just in place with part of the sows starting like 2 weeks ago. So we just make it in place. So had it taken effect January, we wouldn't have had any. And so
Okay.
we'll have some pigs right now coming into July. And I know a few other producers that will have, but I think after the initial shock of, or start of that, I think the people converting just stopped once it was going to go to Supreme Court. And so, and keep in mind, to have that product, you had to start breeding. You know, it's not quite a year from the day you start breeding, because this isn't something where in the old days where the OPG, you could start the minute you signed up to be OPG and your sows were starting to be OPG, your pigs became eligible. That's not the case.
Wait, real quickly.
That animal has to be bred.
What's OPG?
Open pen gestation.
Okay, so there was a rule about, hey, real quickly also, Rob, you should know this. On the north of you by about an hour is where Bobby Brockman lives. And she also, Todd is kind of her little pet. When I pick on Todd, she comes to his defense. It almost gets like nauseating sometimes because I pick on Todd and she comes to his defense like a little mother hen. It's really, it's almost cute, but it's also nauseating. I want to throw it out there real quickly about the money on this, but I also want to talk about the fraud factor.
Right.
Rob Brenneman has a 12,000 sow unit that is compliant. And maybe a few other producers that are large scale like him. Okay, that's what? How many sows do you have? 50 or 60,000?
50,000.
Okay, so 1/4 of your sows are now compliant. And you do all your stuff through Tyson. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, the Angus thing I always said is rife with fraud, because if you got, you know, 10,000 steers a day that goes through the Dodge City, Kansas thing, and it's supposed to be black hided, have these other credentials, there's so much room for, they're not going to stop. The Packers aren't going to stop their line. Are we really going to pretend that Tyson is separating sows from 1/4 of Brenneman's production, and then they're going to trace those all the way through? I'm calling bullshit. If Tyson says, man, we've got to stock some shelves in California, grab product, I think that it's going to be, yeah, grab product from, wait a minute, it has to be from that place over there, and it has to be from this over here. And I say, just get me the stuff over there. I think there's all kinds of room for fudge factor. Somebody else, Todd, I don't know.
Yeah, it could be for sure. I mean, I think probably what most of these plants are going to do is they're going to try to take one shift, or at least half of one shift, and say, we're going to kill compliant pigs on Fridays or Friday afternoons or whatever it ends up being. The problem is it's a pretty small percentage really of your total kill, but it's too significant to ignore, and it's not significant enough to really, you know, kind of create
to switch. Well, or do they just, if you really think that they're going to adhere to it, which I don't think that they will, then you're saying, okay, the factory in Loveland, Colorado is gonna be our Prop 12 facility. So every hog west of, whatever, somewhere in Nebraska is going to go to that facility, and that's where, is that, do you think that will happen? Rob? do you think
That's
gonna-
tough because then you basically add cost because your compliant and non-compliant pigs are not geographically located. And so now you end up having to ship some pigs further because they're compliant, and then some pigs further because they're not compliant. So it's just another example where you start to kind of try to figure out a way to do this quickly and easily. And there's just not a good way. Now, I will say, New Jersey passed some legislation just recently in the past couple of weeks. Massachusetts has I think it's Mass that has a ballot initiative.
Yep.
Yeah, so what we may end up with is more than just California.
Well, the point I said from the very beginning was it becomes a de facto national regulation. De facto meaning it's not written that way, but it is in fact, as the cards lay, the regulation. Here's my big point. What's next? If this becomes, wait a minute, Todd, when you just, hey, wait, Rob, this is something also. When Rob just scratched his brow, he has one of those little bracelets like they give him so he can go to the water park. Are you at a water park, Todd?
No, I don't have
Oh,
a
dear
bracelet.
God.
He's talking about me.
It's my remarkable pen.
He's talking about me. Yes, I am at a resort.
Are you
talking, Todd?
Do you go down the water slide? Are you gonna go down the water slide, Todd?
No, I missed that yesterday.
All right. Anyway, so the question is,
So
if
can I
this
answer
becomes-
something before you start?
yep,
Let me talk. Okay, so on our particular case with Tyson, we've been going over these numbers for months. And they've been really anal about that we're doing this right. So we're large enough that we'll fill a shift. And so we're gonna fill the shift. We take our pigs in at night, they're segregated. And I can tell you the pigs that are going in on Monday night or Sunday night will be segregated. And the only pigs they're gonna kill on that shift, which is 2,600, is gonna be our 2,600 Prop 12 pigs, because they're planning on a break in that line. That's what we do for other things that we supply them with also. And they are anal about that. If we're one load short, then we will stop. That I can tell you. And the relationship that we've built over the last, we've had more conversations over the last 3 weeks about this than the conversations we've had over the last 10 years. But they are persistent in that this is what we've got and this is what we're going to take. So that's what we're doing. And at the end of the day,
Hey, Rob, is that going to influence your flow a little bit? In other words, will you pull pigs ahead or hold some pigs to make sure you fill the kill, right?
yep. So we will, by the 1st of January, we'll be, if God forbid, no disease pressures, which we're in Washington County, anything can happen. We should be about 13,000 a week. So we will kill a shift then, a full shift.
Okay,
a full
perfect.
kill shift. And so for us, it works good because our top outs will come back on Monday and Tuesday, whatever day they decide to do this, if it's Monday, Tuesday, or whatever it is. So it works, it'll work good for both of us because we still got other pigs too. And so far we've had the ability to shuffle the flow or to make sure that we're flowing the Prop 12 pigs by themselves into that shift. And that's all, and we know that's all that's going to get delivered.
It's also the only way then to segregate the fab.
Yes.
And that's really the most important part, right? Because we all know pigs get intermingled one lot into another. You can't read tattoos. It's the only way to segregate the fab.
And so in our case, this is the facts. So the sow farm, we have 2 sow farms right here where I'm sitting. And one's called the home farm, one's called the hill farm. Each have their own prem ID. When those pigs go to a finisher or a nursery, they develop the prem ID of that nursery. Then if they go to another one, they develop the prem ID of that finisher. So there might be commingled pigs into those sites, but not Prop 12 pigs. But the Prop 12 pigs for the hill farm and the home farm are 2 different prem ID numbers. So we have to segregate those by the prem ID number so we trace it back because we don't mix those farms anyway. So you go boom, boom, goes back to the farm. In a normal, let's say if we're talking animal health disease, they take the Prem ID that is at when it's there. And the Prem ID from the sow farm would be traced to that. So it kind of comes down to the stuff we're already doing. And so it's not been too bad, but it's just that in a nutshell, we don't want to fuck it up, period. So, my indication is today, Damian, I don't believe Tyson wants to fuck it up either.
Do you think that they'll actually really stay the course and do it the right way versus just saying, yeah, we're going to grab pork whenever we need it, wherever we need it, and we'll pretend it's Prop 12 because you think they fear the actual potential.
The fines are enormous.
Yeah.
And by the way, yeah,
Jamie,
so
do you
they
remember
also have
what
to
the
think about their
fine-
customers, right? Because ultimately the pressure comes on their customers, the Cisco or Kroger or whoever.
Right.
They do not want to break that relationship.
Yep. And we've got some relationships with PFG, so all this kind of ties
There
together.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this has been, we've already do some of this anyway for that purpose. We segregate, for PFG because they got, we do certain things for that line. And so, and they're very, very anal about this comes from our farm. And that's what happens. And so they've been really good at it. I believe in them. I believe their intent is to do it right. I also believe that nobody wants that shelf to go empty of pork, because if it gets replaced by something else, it's going to take a long time to get that space back. And so the little bit of time frame of having it in the freezer for the next 6 months, that'll buy us some time, but that'll be gone fast.
Hey, Rob, by the way, that's also a great comment. And what's really interesting in the economics of all of this is, right, is you start pulling pork out. Beef is very high priced right now, right? The only competitor that you have really for that product is chicken. And then it's now going to change the poultry economics and what's going on in the rest of the country. I mean, there are lots of unintended consequences here, right?
There is. And there's, don't rule out, stuff coming over to the border that's illegal. I mean, from any other state, black market, you'll see black market pork up here, I'm sure. All of a sudden the object is the consumer does not run out of pork.
Yeah, but you're saying it won't be Tyson maybe, but a smaller processor will be independent chains and things like this.
Yeah, I think there'll be somebody that will figure out how to fill the gap.
Okay, so I got several questions, but I want to ask around here, Walt and Carrie and Christy and Jill and Bobby, because I got another thing about the state to state nature of this. Anybody got anything?
Todd? Oh, I thought he raised his hand.
Bobby always sits
Jamie?
back, then she has something. Go ahead, Bobby. I know you got something. And I know
Well-
if it's just to defend Todd, that's fine too.
It is not to defend Todd, but my question is, how did the dairy industry be able to get their calves excluded from this and only veal calves pigged? Like, how did that happen?
My thought about that is it's really cleverly constructed by the animal rights activists. Like, that's a really big, there's a lot of dairies in California. So this was one way to kind of eat the elephant one bite at a time, I think, and set a precedence, right, with some unfunded mandate across the US. And I think if they would have expanded it from veal calves to dairy calves, that they would have had an incredibly hard time. They just would have had a bigger fight back from their own constituents within California.
Within California, the poultry industry was mostly already compliant. The pig industry was pretty much non-existent. And same for the veal calf industry.
Right.
They would have had a
So if you'd have
significant
picked on
lobby.
dairy, because 21% of the milk production in the country still comes out of California, if they'd have put them in the mix, then they'd have had a fight on their hands. Is that the assertion from Jamie? And
Yeah, and it was already tied, so.
Yeah, Jamie, that makes total sense. I just wanted to know if it was driven by them or if there could be any credit given to the lobbyists on the dairy side.
Maybe a little, but I think that if you followed anything that happened with the ballot initiative that they tried in Colorado last year about that animal rights activists did about breeding animals and the whole slaughter age and la la la. I think it was just really cleverly constructed by the animal rights organizations.
Probably so. I have a question. It's funny, the anti-GMO fervor hit its peak between about 2014 and 2013, 2016, 17. And all of a sudden, I don't know, it went away, and then COVID became the big, hot thing. The big argument back then was we don't want a patchwork of state laws that are hard to comply with. And now we have exactly a patchwork of state laws. And the bigger concern that I think that we should all have in ag is what's next? My God, Brenneman's over here adding $1 million of cost to a sow facility, roughly. Is that what it is? You spend about $1 million.
It's about 2.5 million.
But additional?
Yep.
Additional. He had, what's the next thing? And so, I mean, and then also, if it's not California, what if it's Massachusetts? Are we going to comply? I mean, there's really a concern here.
Yeah, and I think that's the takeaway, I think, for those of you that don't interact directly with the pig industry. I mean, what's next? What do they decide to take on next? I mean, I used an example in social media a while back. What if a group of Midwestern states decide that we're not going to be buying produce from California if it's, irrigated out of a, endangered, source of water? I mean, there's all kinds of, retaliatory, things that could happen there, or just, whether it's environmental or, animal welfare or, GMO or whatever it is, anybody can do what they've done, and it just sets a really dangerous precedent and can get really ugly really fast if these types of strategies, which have obviously been successful, keep getting implemented in other, and Bobby mentioned dairy, they got a pass this time, but are they going to get a pass next time? I wouldn't bet on it.
I got another thing that I think we should really consider. Usually behind a lot of these initiatives, we get wound up and we think it's just, okay, animal rights wackos, or it's just, tree huggers or whatever. And if you look a little deeper, it's kind of like, which of course, a thinking person like me saw this a long time ago, the anti-fossil fuel green crusaders in like Europe, Western Europe, were actually financed by Putin because it worked out great. Kill the industry in Western Europe of fracking and mining, etc., and you make them completely dependent on your natural gas. Usually, if you follow the money behind every protest or crusade, there's actually somebody pulling the strings that's making money. Al Gore and climate change, for God's sakes. It's become his business for 30 years. Who's making the money off of this? Who is behind? Is it truly just a bunch of animal rights activists that it becomes the business of the Humane Society and it keeps their lawyers employed, it keeps their PR people employed? Or is there some money behind this that we're not even thinking of? Well, the conspiracy person, but I'm telling you, I can cite all sorts of things where there's always money behind the crusade.
The people that were already compliant are, definitely going to benefit from this. And so
you think Neiman Ranch financed the Humane Society so that all of a sudden it made cage-free pigs look like it's
they had a press release that looked almost exactly like the Humane Society of the United States. So I mean, I don't know whether they had any money behind it, but they were sure as hell dancing around and celebrating their.
All right. Well, here's what's really interesting about that one. If I'm Neiman Ranch and I've already got this consumer base that wants happy pigs that have 40 square feet. The last thing I want is Rob Brenneman to come in and drop his damn poker chips on the table, because Rob Brenneman can run Neiman Ranch the hell out of business if he gets mad enough. So I don't understand that I don't think that's the right logic.
Well, I mean, their logic is they're compliant, but they already had a pre-existing market, you know, and so their
Yeah,
market.
and they just invented more competition.
Right, so now, yeah, so now you're gonna pay for not just the Prop 12 compliance, but for all the other stuff that they do. You know, you're gonna end up paying for that because they're not gonna pay, you know, they're not gonna accept a less money than they were getting before. Their premium can only go up from at this point.
Yeah, I think you're talking a little bit about two separate issues. So for sure, there is, I can't tell you who, exactly the who, but there's definitely money and people making money in addition to just keeping HSUS lawyers employed. And like, there's certainly a larger conspiracy-like feeling initiative behind, way back behind all of it, but I couldn't tell you who it is, but there's certainly something there, right? I think you can kind of argue the same thing with like all the breastfeeding natural birth stuff, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, right? And then in terms of the like market and competitive advantage or not for producers, I have long said for I'm not going to call Nyman Ranch by name because that's not what I have experienced with them, but you have small niche producers that are already compliant, they're already GAP level 5 or whatever the case may be, and all they have done as part of their marketing ploy is to bash people like Rob, right? Like that's their marketing advantage. Well, be careful what you ask for because you just turned your product into the commodity.
That's my point that I'm saying, Jamie, is that, you know, if I'm the little organic rhubarb producer and I'm going to go around and tell everybody, yeah, those nasty Walmart people, those nasty factory farms, the Rob Brennemans of rhubarb production, and I just harpoon the hell out of them as my marketing campaign, the last thing I want is for a law to come into effect that now I got to compete with Rob Brenneman. I can't do it. And so all I've done is just, I want him to be my harpoon. I want him to be my straw man. I don't want him to be my competition. You know what I mean?
Well, I think, but from their perspective, though, they're willing to do whatever they have to do to keep their niche, right? So if they have to start, you know, giving their sales, you know, massages twice a week, you know, in order to, you know, continue to appeal to this, small group of people that's willing to pay a premium for almost any extreme, you know, idea. I mean, that's their mentality.
Well, then that's the point that I'm also going to make.
As long as they keep willing to do more, you know, than what the conventional producers will do.
So Rob Brenneman's 24 foot now becomes industry standard in another 10 years.
It's going to be, that's the problem, is it has de facto become the industry standard. I mean, nobody's going to build a new facility now that is not 24 square feet. 24 square feet is the standard in the European Union, by the way. There's some loopholes there. There's a lot of loopholes there that you can, you know, get around that. But one point is the European Union has an exception for gilts. So they only have to have 18 square feet for gilts. And there is no such exception in the Prop 12 legislation. So we're providing, you saw what you saw there, what he showed you, that picture of sows with 24 square feet. Imagine gilts that are sometimes, you know, 200 pounds lighter or even more. Now, all of a sudden they have to have 24 square feet too, which is absurd. And that may sound like a small thing, but it's really not, especially if you have a gilt development unit on site where you have relatively small gilts there that still technically have to have 24 square feet. There's some questions on exactly how that gets implemented and whether they're counted that way, but there is no exception like there is in Europe for the 24 square feet for gilts.
I have a question for Mr. Brenneman or Jamie or one of you hog people. Is it the entirety of the sow's existence, or farrowing crates are exempt? Where is the 24? When do they have to have throughout the phase? When are they supposed to be in these pens that are bigger, and when can they be in? Are farrowing crates supposed to be 24 feet as well?
No, not yet. But that's the question. So I'll tell you how it works right now, and then I'll let Jamie tell you what the requirements are. So normally, even in a pen gestation system, normally they go into a breeding crate, which would be non-compliant. And they're bred there and they're kept there until they're preg checked. So they're preg check
And
positive.
that's when
and
Rob
that-
said 42 days. Is that when you do it at 42 days? You
Yeah.
pray?
Yeah, it's up to 42 days, yeah.
Up to 42 days, yeah.
And then they're typically moved to pen gestation, or if they're in a crated barn, they'll stay in that crate. And then they go into farrowing and they're in a confinement crate, farrowing crate. Those are exempted right now from the Prop 12 legislation. And so they can be in there 5 days before. And then they can stay as long as you want in the farrowing crate, as long as they have pigs on them nursing. And then Jamie, you want to explain what the requirements are for Prop 12?
Yeah, so for Prop 12, they have to have the sows. Well, you have to start by defining their production cycle. So they're considered when they are inseminated and bred to when they wean their pigs is a production cycle. So throughout that production cycle, from breeding to weaning of their pigs, they have, excluding farrowing, they have to be in Prop 12 compliant housing. So you can lock them up in breeding stalls if you want to. You can preg check them, you can heat check, you can do whatever you need to do in stalls that are non-compliant, but you can only do it for 6 hours at a time and no more than 24 hours total in a 30-day period. So you get 4 6-hour days, essentially a month, for them to be in non-compliant housing. And then they can't go to farrowing more than 5 days before their expected due date. And then when you wean them, they have to go back into compliant housing if she's going to stay in compliance within 6 hours of weaning. Gilts, so if you have an on-site gilt development unit, so gilts are 6 months of age or older and have been bred. So if you're not breeding gilts in the gilt development unit, then they don't have to be in compliant housing. If all they're doing is learning to use the feeder, or they're growing up, or you're doing heat no service checking or whatever in the GDU, but you're not breeding them there, they don't have to be in compliant housing. You can also, so a sow or a gilt doesn't have to be in compliance, like doesn't have to be compliant for every breeding cycle or production cycle. So if you have a sow that was not in Prop 12 housing as a P2 or a P3, but you want her to be in Prop 12 housing as a P4, she can be. Or let's say she's been Prop 12 her entire 5 litters or whatever, and then you're going to cull her as soon as she gets designated or marked as a cull, then she can go to a stall or a pen that is not Prop 12 compliant. So you can also run a split operation. You can have both. You can have Prop 12 compliant and not compliant operations on the same sow farm. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, but you do have to declare that in your certification, and you have to be able to have lots of policies and documentation to show that you're not commingling them, that the non-compliant ones stay non-compliant and their resulting pigs are not sold as compliant, and the compliant sows stay compliant, they don't get mixed, and their offspring get segregated and sold as.
Again, the verification part of this is, you think it'll be farmed out? Is Tyson gonna come to Brenneman? Brenneman, who's gonna come and check you on this?
Jamie,
Jamie's gonna come and check you on this?
Yeah, so you have to, I am a certified agent, so I can do Prop 12 certification audits for producers. So you can, those official certifications on the farm can only be done by an approved certifying agent from California Department of Food and Agriculture. Right now, there's 5 of them, 5 firms, and they have auditors working for them.
So Jamie, would a
the one I'm
system
gonna
be able to
hire.
get their own people, their own employees certified to be auditors?
Probably technically you could, yeah, as long as you go through the CDFA's approval process and you have the expertise and you submit your audit tool, I'm sure you could.
So it's
Yeah.
no big deal for Jamie because we know that she can be bought. What about the people from California?
I have no idea.
Kind of like the organic thing. Okay, then my last question on this, when you were talking about being able to change if you decide, Rob, to not do the Prop 12, I was concerned you're gonna have to actually install new pins. What you're talking about is the farrowing crates remain the same. It'd just be moving some pins around.
Yeah, I don't, all I got, that pin you saw, I just put 8 more animals in there.
Because they're they're not, it's open jet, what is it? Is it kind of sub-open jet? What do you call
What
it?
we call ESF, electronic sow feeding. So it's open pen, they go into and eat out of the electronic sow feeding. So I just put more animals in that pen if Prop 12, if it's not necessary. Like for question 3, the main thing on Prop 12 is the animal has to be able to turn around and back, you know, whether it goes into crate, backs out and turns around, or whether it's in this pen walking around and goes into a station and eats and comes back out. It's about turning around and laying down. When you watch these animals, they talk about laying down against steel. The first animal to lay down in a pen is next to a steel panel. And the next animal lay next to her is in front of her. Next animal, if you watch them after they eat, they go start laying around, then they lay right on top of each other. And then that's why that whole area is blank, because they've chosen to sleep by the gates first, by the wall first, and then they start packing out from there. So the human nature would say the pig is perfect candidate to be in a stall because that's where she ironically wants to be. The free access stalls, they would legitimately go in there and stay on their own and not come out of pig. But sometimes they come out and most of the time they spend it in there. Given the choice, they would rather be in a crate.
So I think the other thing too is that everybody's trying to think through this. There is also a push in Europe and here in the US among the activists to require turnaround farrowing crates. So, you know, that's another big question is if you're going to be building a new farm or you're converting an existing farm and to make it Prop 12 compliant, do you go ahead and just assume that at some point in the future that's going to happen and that you're going to have to put in a bigger farrowing crate so that she can turn around? You know, I mean, there's just not a lot of guidance for producers on what to do.
Yeah, that's just too fucking expensive. That turnaround, and plus that's going to cost you productivity. That ain't going to work, and it doesn't make any sense. So I think we can fight that one for a long time. The ultimate goal, everybody to know, is that you got a pool of money like Damian was talking about earlier that's funding HSUS. So you got all these people that don't believe there's the number one thing I believe that drives them is not so much about the fact that they don't like animals. They don't like to eat animals. I don't think that's the fact. The fact is that there's somebody in agriculture or whatever it is that's figured out how to profit off of that and be in existence. And that's what they have a problem with because it's all about power. It's a bunch of people with power that want to control people that don't have power, and we can do that by the pocketbook. So if we make pork really expensive because it costs more to raise it, then less people will buy it. Well, the only fortunate thing we have going today is that beef is so high and chicken is way overpriced, and pork is still the cheapest product out there to, you know, to eat. And so, and it's nutritious. And so when you look at all that, the object, they pick on pork because they know it's got the greatest creativity of people in the system to make it competitive, and we're going to do what it takes to make it competitive. So every time they set a goalpost, we move with it, and we show them up, and it pisses them off. So then they just keep moving the goalposts because we're smart enough to figure it out how to do it.
So just to clarify, so just so everybody's clear, so if you have a current pen gestation system, most likely in order to comply you have to eliminate your breeding crates, so you can't do that anymore. So you got to take those crates out, probably use that space for pens, and then you have to increase the square footage in your gestation barn. And that means either adding additional gestation space, so building another building, adding on to a building, converting some other building in for that purpose, or reducing your inventory. So either way, obviously that costs you money. If you reduce your inventory, then you obviously are going to make less money out of that same facility. And if you build new construction or remodel, you're going to have to pay for that remodeling. So that's the real, when we talk about the cost to comply, That's generally what we're talking about. And that would be even bigger for a pin gestation, a crated gestation system, because then you have to take out your gestation crates and either reduce sows by an even bigger amount or build an even bigger amount of new space.
All right, it's been an hour and 17 minutes. I don't want to, Rob has people go and yell out. And Jamie has, by the way, Jamie's moved into consultant. Did you just see Todd's lifestyle? That a pork consultant, he goes on vacation, he flies to China once in a while. He's sitting at a water resort right now with one of those little things on his wrist so he can go and take the water slide. By the way, guys your size are not supposed to take water slides, Todd. You know, it's for children, okay? You understand that?
Okay,
Sure.
duly noted.
Where are you, by the way?
Myrtle Beach.
Really? Okay. All
Thank you,
right.
sir.
All right. Well, here's the deal. By the way, a big thanks to everybody being on here. On July 14th, we're going to bring on a guy with a company called Farm Wave Technology. His whole thing is about reducing waste through the harvesting, and he's talking about broadacre crops. I want to eventually attack the subject that Todd pointed out. We keep talking in agriculture about reducing inefficiencies. We don't talk about increasing margins. So I want to get there. This guy's still on the reducing inefficiencies or reducing waste side. And he's also an entrepreneur. And we always like when we bring on entrepreneurs because we can talk to him about, you know, how he's not even an ag guy, but he's really become an ag guy. So it's kind of an interesting thing with him. And then July 28th, we're going to have someone from Kerry recommended, a weather consultant that's turned weather consultancy into a business. And part of that is for agriculture. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it used to be farmers just watched their phone. This guy actually puts out, you know, recommendations on what you should be doing now. So I want to talk about that. And then in August, we've got some other cool stuff coming up. So that's July 14th, July 28th. I'm going to get out of here. I'm in Tennessee. I got to go film some footage now with drone technology. Thanks, Carrie, for turning your phone on. Thanks for the recommendation for that July meeting. And then, by the way, the July 14th guy might be in Brazil if he has plane problems getting home, and we'll have a substitute. So I'll let you know if that happens. So anyway, Todd, go hit the water slide. Are you one of those guys that like pushes children down and like knocks them out of the way so you can get up the slide, like, you know, and like do more slide runs than you're supposed to at the water park?
I try not to go to the water park. I'm usually fishing when everybody else is at the water park.
Yeah, got it. All right, Rob Brenneman, thanks for being here. Oh, I want to throw one last thing. Did you say you kill 13,000 fat hogs per week is your number?
We're 26,000 today.
And you're going to,
13 Prop 12.
so you think you're going to have half of yours that will go Prop 12?
Yep.
Okay, and real quick, if you're sending 26,000 right now, aren't you about are you about 1 to 2 weeks worth of the American supply per year?
Shit, I don't know. So we would be. So
Well, how many pigs get killed? How many pigs get killed per week?
We're 1.4 million pigs this year.
1.4. What's the total pig harvest a year?
130 million, 132 or 3 million.
All right, so you're about 1% of the hog production.
Yep.
And I wonder how many people of your scale are absolutely jumping through the Prop 12 compliance. Do you got like 5 of your buddies that are doing this?
Everybody's dibbling in it.
You're going a little more than dibble. You're going to go
We're
half.
doing a little more than dibbling, but everybody's got some, all the guys that I associate with have some.
And then
That would be pretty accurate. If you look at the top 40 pork powerhouses, which Rob is a part of, nearly everyone in the top 40 at least has like a sow farm or some small part of their production is.
yeah.
Like,
So the idea is, so we're going to end up having the supply. It's just a matter of when the prices, when the premium comes off of that, I think is going to be the question, right? When you premium for it.
But there's going to be a window where we are way short of meeting the demand. That'll be really interesting to see what happens during that time.
And that's going to happen at the end of this year, beginning of next, correct?
That's probably going to happen about the same time they're working on the farm bill. Might not be bad timing, okay, guys? Just
Good point.
saying.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It
Might
might
not
be.
be bad timing.
You're saying like the end of this year?
Yep.
Yeah, we'll leave it right there. I like it. All right, let's get out of here. Todd, go down the water slide. Mr. Brenneman, thanks for being here. Jamie, as always. Christy, thanks for turning your camera on. We missed you. Walls, Jim with the phone, look at the window behind there, kind of like a Jesus shot. Anyway, we're gonna end.
Hey, really good stuff, Damian. Fun discussion.